It's not cake. It's not everything.
We test the intelligent traction management and all-wheel drive technology available on the Honda Pilot in severe driving conditions, so it can handle your winter. Get a great deal on the Honda Pilot with standard Honda sensing.
What's up guys, Jason here with FeelAwesomeCompany.com, and in this video I want to go over some of the different signs and symptoms of a magnesium deficiency versus a potassium deficiency. Now with these two deficiencies, they can feel very similar, and they can share a lot of the same signs, such as like if you experience heart palpitations, arrhythmias, high blood pressure, constipation, weakness, fatigue, and cramping. These can be different signs that can really lead and point to either a magnesium deficiency or a potassium deficiency. Although with cramping, depending on when you tend to cramp up, this can definitely lead towards one deficiency versus the other, which I'll get into shortly. And so now, starting with some of the different signs of a magnesium deficiency, these can include, like, if you have a lot of trouble relaxing and falling asleep at night, also different mental health issues such as anxiety and depression, and then if you also regularly experience a lot of like muscle twitches and spasms, and then also cramping. But with magnesium deficiency, it's generally you tend to cramp more either like at night or during the day, but when you're in a more relaxed state. Now with potassium deficiency, this also can include cramping, but with potassium, this usually happens more like if you tend to cramp up while you're working out or doing other very vigorous type activities. And then besides that, if you experience a lot of dizziness, nausea, and abdominal bloating, these are other signs that you are more likely to be potassium deficient and not so much deficient in magnesium. Now, if you want to learn more about nutrition and other related health topics, check out my other videos on this channel, and then I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Potassium. Now, you don't hear that much about it, but you really should. It's found in all of these delicious foods. But amazingly, most of you aren't getting enough of this important mineral. Today, I'm going to reveal the subtle signs that you're not getting enough potassium in your body. That affects the most vital organs across the board. We're going to start off with Melissa, who's holding a brain. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
You're holding a brain because the first sign you're not getting enough potassium is brain fog. Does that ever afflict you?
All the time.
What does it do to you?
I would literally just start talking to someone and then in the middle of my sentence, just forget what I'm saying.
It drops off.
All the time.
Which is not a rare phenomenon. Young, old, we all experience it. So here's why it's important. Imagine this wind-up toy over here is your brain. So you have enough potassium in there, it goes banging along and doing, but as you lose the potassium, it hovers perilously close to the edge here. Oh, and you fall into the oblivion of forgetfulness, of confusion, of losing a train of thought, as you mentioned, and you can't grab it again.
Right.
Giving your brain potassium allows the cells in the brain to function the way they're supposed to. Many of these symptoms are related to stress, but actually it's caused by the potassium. So instead of beating yourself up about it, give yourself the potassium and wind yourself back up again, and you'll be back in business.
All right.
It is actually the best solution for a lot of folks who have that problem. Thank you, Melissa. Next up is Colleen, and you got a heart phenomenon. Young, old, we all experience it. So here's why it's important. Imagine this wind-up toy over here is your brain. So So you have enough potassium in there, it goes banging along and doing, but as you lose the potassium, it hovers perilously close to the edge here. Oh, and you fall into the oblivion of forgetfulness, of confusion, of losing your train of thought, as you mentioned, and you can't grab it again.
Right.
Giving your brain potassium allows the cells in the brain to function the way they're supposed to. Many of these symptoms are related to stress, but actually it's caused by the potassium. So instead of beating yourself up about it, give yourself the potassium and wind yourself back up again, and you'll be back in business.
All right.
It is actually the best solution for a lot of folks who have that problem. Thank you, Melissa. Next up is Colleen, and you got a heart.
Yes.
And you have a heart because the second sign of potassium deficiency is actually heart palpitations. That's when your heart starts pounding and it skips a couple beats.
Right.
Does that ever happen to you?
It does happen, yeah.
Well, it happens for a lot of different reasons, but one of the common problems, and we see this in the hospital a lot as well, is potassium problems. So go ahead and put that down.
Okay.
We're gonna do a little demonstration about why this is the case. You like the game Simon Says?
Of course.
Audience, you ready to play with us? We're gonna play Simon Says. We'll all do this together. Remember, only when Simon says something do you do it. All right, Simon says, clap your hands 3 times. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's say Simon says, clap your hands 3 times again. Simon says again, clap your hands 2 times. Oh, I heard a couple 3s, although most of you did well. Well, every once in a while, we get thrown off a little bit.
Right.
And the heart's the same way. That heart, just while I've been talking, has been pumping for most of you at least once a second. So if every once in a while it misses a beat, you'll sense it. And unfortunately, that's occurring prominently because we're not having enough potassium in our life.
Okay.
You have a question?
Yeah, what kind of foods can I eat to increase my potassium?
That's why we're here today.
Okay.
You hold for 1 second, we're gonna get
Okay.
to all that, because that's important.
All right, thank you.
Most of us only get about half of the potassium. potassium we need.
Okay.
There's a big gap, and there are places we can make it up.
Okay.
Finally, Miranda has a muscle. It's a third sign you're not getting enough potassium, which is muscle spasms.
Yes.
Does that afflict you ever?
All the time. After working out, I get leg cramps, Charlie horses when I wake up.
She mentions after she works out. That's called showing off. She could have just mentioned the sleep part. All right, put that down for a second. Let me
Okay.
show you what happens. So
Okay.
let's say this is
working
one of
out.
your muscle fibers. You know, this muscle is made up of literally, hundreds of thousands of little fibers like this.
Right.
So if that fiber's functioning normally, when you're working out, show off, back and forth and back and forth and doing all that great stuff. When you don't have enough potassium, without the right potassium amounts, the ability of fluids to move in and out of the cells go away. This gets big and it gets stuck and it won't move anymore and it's frozen. And that causes that spasming sense that you have it because in fact, that's what's happening. Nothing's
Right.
moving. So you have to have the potassium in order to let the cells of the muscle work, the heart work, and even the brain work. The question is, how much do you need? Now, since you asked, everyone come along with me. Let's talk about that. The amount that we need is about 4,700 milligrams a day. Don't bother memorizing that. All you have to know is that most of us are getting about half that amount, which is what concerns me. That's causing the muscle spasms and the brain fog and the palpitations. But you can get your daily dose by adding the right foods into your diet. And I'm going to go through a bunch specifically. These are foods you can find everywhere, but you got to get these into your diet and squeeze them in as many ways as you can. Bananas, I love. A lot of the orange foods, sweet potatoes. I love beets, but the beet greens have a ton of potassium in them. Don't throw them away. You can make smoothies out of them. You can, include them in a lot of different dishes. A lot of these vegetables have them as well. Dried fruits have them. I happen to love dried dates, which are good for something else as well. You ever get constipated?
Yes.
At least she works out, but these are good for that as well. But again, dried
Yes.
fruits have a lot of potassium. Beans have great potassium. Fish, which is sort of a surprising source because most of us never thought of that. And yogurt has potassium in it. So there's many different sources of it. All you got to do is push yourself to double down on this because you literally have to double the amount. A multivitamin, who takes multivitamins? Oh. All right, well, 1 out of 3 is not bad. Yeah. All right, so multivitamins, they don't always have it, but just check on the label to make sure they have potassium. And at least that's one way of getting a little bit more than what you need. If you do it just that smart way, you'll be able to get the potassium you need in your body and obviate some of these concerns. Any questions? No. All right, so to make it easier for you, I'm going to give you a easy essential mineral list on potassium and a grocery list of how to go shopping for it on DrOz.com. We'll be right back.
Okay, we're going to talk about a
Gap. Let's talk about daily dose by adding the right foods into your diet. And I'm going to go through a bunch specifically. These are foods you can find everywhere, but you got to get these into your diet and squeeze them in as many ways as you can. Bananas, I love. A lot of the orange foods, sweet potatoes. I love beets, but the beet greens have a ton of potassium in them. Don't throw them away. You can make smoothies out of them. You can, include them in a lot of different dishes. A lot of these vegetables have them as well. Dried fruits have them. I happen to love dried dates, which are good for something else as well. You ever get constipated?
Yes.
At least she works out, but right.
Yes. Yes.
I failed all of my classes in high school and ended up dropping out. I also scored in the 99th percentile on the GMAT and got a master's degree from Yale. How do these things happen to the same person? Nootropics. Back when I was in school, I'd force myself to study, but no matter how motivated I was, I would just stare at the pages and not retain any of the information. I started trying everything to help. I meditated, microdosed, tried prescription meds and ice baths, but my life changed forever when I discovered nootropics. After I found the right nootropics for me, I was able to concentrate and focus for hours. And for the first time, I'd actually retain everything that I studied. I learned that whenever I had trouble focusing, it was because of an imbalance in my neurotransmitters. It was my genetics, not my work ethic. That's why I started Thesis, the world's first truly customized nootropics. We use data to find out exactly what your brain needs to perform at its best. Then we ship it straight to your door. By optimizing your brain chemistry, we can help boost your productivity, energy level, and focus on demand in a convenient, once-a-day pack.
What's up, guys? Jason here with FeelAwesomeCompany.com, and in this video I'm going to go over the benefits of L-theanine for sleep. But before I jump into the video, if it's your first time here, welcome. I'm Jason, and this channel is all about health, nutrition, supplementation, and everything to help you feel awesome. And if that sounds good to you, consider subscribing. Okay, and so the first thing I want to talk about is that L-theanine can help to put you in a more alpha brainwave state. And when you're in this state, it's very calm, you're very relaxed, and it's a good state to be in to help you to get to sleep easier. But besides that, L-theanine also has effects on neurotransmitters, specifically GABA and serotonin. And so GABA is a very calming, very relaxing neurotransmitter, and L-theanine's been shown to help increase your levels of GABA, which this can also help you to just get to sleep much easier. But besides GABA, L-theanine also helps to increase the production of serotonin, which serotonin on its own can be relaxing, but serotonin can also get converted into melatonin, which plays a very big role in your overall sleep quality. And so by taking L-theanine, it's been shown to help you get to sleep easier, have less sleep disturbances throughout the night, and just get better overall, deeper, more restorative sleep. Now, if you want to learn more about L-theanine and other related topics, check out the other videos on this channel, and make sure to subscribe for more content just like this. Peace.
At iHerb, we make and sell the best health and wellness products on the market because we know what's inside every bottle matters, like the vitamins you and your family take, the keto-friendly protein shakes you need, or the beauty products you love. But unlike the rest, we care enough to test and verify. Store them at optimum temperature and same-day ship at peak freshness anywhere in the U.S. or around the world. Come check out the more than 30,000 high-quality, verified with 100% real reviews, fresh and fast-shipped anywhere products available at iHerb.com. iHerb, the place to shop for wellness.
Well, that was a very nice introduction. Thank you. I want to say I'm very grateful to Anthony for arranging this program. This idea of his of bringing psychology to the public, to me, is the most important thing that we as psychologists can do. The volume of information is so great, and the quality of information has improved so markedly over time that there's a lot to share. And we have a relatively short time this evening, but I hope to give you a lot of good perspective about things that matter the most in learning to manage depression. So let me say I will be speaking for roughly 45 minutes or so, and then I will open it up to questions. Let me start with a story and get you thinking about this topic. When I was a young psychologist back in 1829, my first job was working in a psychiatric facility, and I was the admissions person. It was my job to admit new patients to the unit. Now, this is a locked facility. people aren't getting locked up because they're doing well. They're not really doing very well at all. And so my job was to interview them, find out why they were there, what was going on in their lives, what the expectations.
Stanford University.
This is Bio 150, isn't it? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so we start off with a scenario. 40-year-old guy, quiet suburban life, married, 15 years, 2 kids, 3.5 dogs, everything's standard, everything's going wonderfully. And one day, out of nowhere, he punches somebody in the face at work. Totally bizarre, out of character. The guy is standing there by the water cooler and makes some comment on some baseball team, takes exception to it, punches him in the face. Utterly strange. Things are quiet. 3 months later, his wife of 15 years, happy marriage, discovers he's having an affair with a 16-year-old checkout kid down at the Safeway. Really weird. Then 3 months after that, he absconds with all the money at work, embezzles it, disappears, and is never seen again. 3 possibilities. First one, this guy is a truly deep creep. Second, he is having the most immature midlife crisis you could ever imagine. Third possibility, he has a mutation in one gene in his head. And what we'll be seeing is this is exactly the profile that you get in a certain neurological disease where it's one gene that's out of whack. First demonstration of that. Okay, just to get a sense of who's here, how many of you think there is a genetic influence on sexual orientation? Okay. How many think it is possible for prenatal events to influence your political opinions 30 years later? Okay. How many think that there is a valid way of using biology to understand who's religious and who isn't? Yeah, not quite as many hands there. Okay, as long as we're in that terrain. How many people believe in God? How many people believe in souls? How many people believe in evil? How many people believe in free will? That's going to change. Okay. Oh, I might as well ask, is there anybody in this room who actually does believe in evolution? Just wanted to make sure, see what we're dealing with here. Okay, how many think that there is a genetic influence and that there's a basic biological difference, a sex difference in levels of aggression? How many think there's biological bases of sex differences in intelligence? Okay, who thinks it's all explained by nature? Who thinks it's all explained by nurture? Who think there's a magnificent, fascinating, nuanced interaction between nature and nurture? Yay, okay, well, everybody's going to get an A+ then. You already have the course under control. Okay, so we start off trying to find something in common. Look at these 4 events here. Or not, in terms of being scraped out there, but these are 4 circumstances that have something surprising in common. Having your period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, taking anabolic steroids. Those of you who are not oriented to it, that's the ones that build up your muscle, like testosterone derivatives. Okay, these all have something in common. Having your period, having a brain tumor, eating a lot of junk food, and taking a lot of anabolic steroids. Anybody want to fathom a guess what's the commonality amongst the 4 of them? Yeah. Hormones, good. Okay, we're often running with hormones. Good. Even more specific than that. Something they all have in common. Oh, come on, somebody want to guess? I see these brief movements of hands there as people change their mind. Okay, it all has to do with hormones. They all have hormones in common, I say, trying to facilitate somebody making the next guess. Oh, come on, they all have something. Okay, we got to get out of here at some point. These all have 4 things in common. All of these have been used successfully in courts of law to explain the behavior of a murderer. In the first case, in the first case. A number of cases where the fact that a woman was having her period at the time of killing someone was part of what a jury said led them to exonerate the person. A literature showing that a disproportionate share of female aggression comes around the time of menses. Next one, there is an area of the brain you will know oh so much about over the next 3 months called the amygdala that has something to do with aggression and has something to do with fear. And you get a brain tumor there, and in a number of cases, you get someone who is uncontrollably violent. And this has also been used successfully in a court of law. Junk food. Any of you who are San Francisco history buffs will know 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Dan White, a disappointed office seeker, assassinated the mayor of San Francisco along with Harvey Milk. And as part of his remarkably successful defense for a double murderer that led to a remarkably short jail sentence was the famed Twinkie defense. The argument that his addiction to junk food caused wild fluctuations in his blood sugar levels, which caused him to do that. Finally, anabolic steroids. Any number of cases of people having uncontrolled violence arguing because they were weightlifters in a wildly abusive range of taking this stuff had something to do with violence. Put all 4 of these together and we get the first of the 2 points of this entire course, which is sometimes the stuff that's going on in your body can dramatically influence what goes on in your brain. Second critical point. Tonight, when you've settled back down and you're ready to go to sleep and you're nice and relaxed and your heart's beating nice and slow, think the following thought. You know, that heart isn't going to beat forever. Think about your lips turning blue after that. Think about the blood flow slowing down. Think about your feet and your toes getting cold. And at that point, you will probably be increasing the rate at which that heart beats. And you will have just seen the second key thing in this course, which is sometimes what's going on in your head will affect every single outpost in your body. And what this course is about is
Give me those. It's not cake.
Stanford.
Blood flow slowing down. Think about your feet and your toes getting cold. And at that point, you will probably be increasing the rate at which that heart beats. And you will have.
I'm not sure that there was ever
Wow, look at this. 94% of people believe company culture is important to an organization's success. Frankly, I have no idea what the other 6% are thinking. You know, usually when people look up ways to improve culture, they look for best practices. And best practices are good, but they're even...
Water is the softest and most yielding substance. Yet, nothing is better than water for overcoming the hard and rigid, because nothing can compete with it. Lao Tzu. Many people are hijacked by the rigidity of their minds. Thinking in categories and fixed ideas can be a great crutch for survival, as it creates clarity in a chaotic universe. But thinking too rigidly also has its negative consequences. Seeing the world in categories and separate boxes limits our perception, so we become stuck in our ideas of how things are, or supposed to be. As the universe is ever changing, and most things, if not everything, is more complex than our minds can comprehend, a more fruitful approach to life would be one that is flexible, tangible, that enables us to flow along. You know, a bit like water. The ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu celebrates flexibility in his timeless work named the Tao Te Ching, in which he opposes the rigid life stance that some people choose to take. In contrast to what many think, weakness, or more specifically, the ability and willingness to yield, can actually be a great strength, according to Taoist philosophy. Hence, Lao Tzu states that the supreme good is like water. This video explores the benefits of being a bit less rigid and a bit more like water. One thing that characterizes Taoist philosophy is a deference towards nature. The ways of nature are all-encompassing. The dance between opposites is the fundamental principle of how the universe works, which manifests as ongoing change. When we observe nature closely and through a Taoist lens, we can see two forces at work, yin and yang, or the feminine and the masculine. Yang consists of the more active elements of existence, like speed, restlessness, productivity, excitement, aggressiveness, being outgoing, but also hardness, dryness, and stiffness. Yin consists of the more passive elements, like silence, receptiveness, not reacting as opposed to reacting, and also softness and flexibility. Our culture celebrates the yang aspects of life. It's all about faster, bigger, more, better, standing your ground, defending your unchanging opinions, confronting and clashing with the enemy, altering rather than adapting. Yin aspects, on the other hand, are looked down upon. For example, being receptive to opposing opinions and being willing to change your views is often seen as weak. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Former American politician Alexander Hamilton famously quoted, which may be true. But if we're not willing to maintain a certain flexibility, never change our viewpoints on anything, never change our approach, and are never willing to bend with the winds of life, we become as rigid as a dead branch. When we observe the nature of water, we'll discover that it's extremely resilient to change, as water is able to take all kinds of different forms. We can pour water in a glass, and it becomes the glass. When it's part of the ocean, it waves. Depending on the outside temperature, water changes its behavior. When it's cooked, it evaporates. When it's frozen, it becomes solid. Thus, water survives many different circumstances by adaptation. The softness of water adds strength to living beings because it makes them flexible and therefore more resilient to outside circumstances. As Lao Tzu stated, the living are soft and yielding, the dead are rigid and stiff. Living plants are flexible and tender, the dead are brittle and dry. End quote. Things that are brittle and dry will break easily and are either dead or equivalent to being dead. The same goes for minds that are rigid and stern. People that are rigid and stern generally have difficulties dealing with change, as they desire permanence rather than the uncertainty of impermanence. Unfortunately for these people, change is inevitable. Life is impermanent. If life would be permanent, it would be lifeless. Thus, when we don't accept the reality of impermanence, we waste a lot of energy fighting the inevitable. Change in life comes in different forms. We could experience small changes, for example, a new colleague. Or we could experience big changes, like moving to another country, divorce, or even death. Now, if we would compare life to a river, we could see its subtle twists and turns as small changes. A drastic change in course would represent a big change, and when it discharges in the ocean, it would be death. We see that the river flows along with the changes of circumstances, adapting to different landscapes and finding its way past obstructions without effort. Even its inevitable annihilation, the river approaches without being troubled, without resistance, as it simply merges into something else. And thus, we live life in a continuous flow, finding our ways around everything that crosses our path, not resisting even the most drastic of changes, including death. But also, when we'd be contained, like water being kept in a jar, we would just be still and be the jar until our circumstances change. Lao Tzu argues in the Tao Te Ching that the soft overcomes the hard. He takes water as a metaphor for this assertion. Water is soft and flexible, but also has the power to erode the hardest materials like rock and metal. I quote, "Everyone knows that the soft and yielding overcomes the rigid and hard, but few can put this knowledge into practice." End quote. So, to be like water, we need to know how we can overcome the hard by being soft. First of all, Taoism is a philosophy about not forcing anything. In practice, we can see that using force is not only exhausting, it often doesn't get us anywhere. Now, this doesn't mean that we should never use force in certain situations, but in many cases, the soft approach is superior to using force when it comes to long-term results, as well as saving our energy and maintaining a tranquil mind. This mechanism is best explained through examples. A great example of the power of softness we can find in the movie Shawshank Redemption, in which the protagonist Andy Dufresne is sentenced to life in Shawshank State Penitentiary for murdering his wife and her lover, even though he keeps saying that he didn't do it. After 19 years of imprisonment, he escapes and flees to Mexico. Andy uses soft and stealthy methods to reach his goals. Probably because of his background as a banker, he is able to think long term and knows that small actions in the present will eventually lead to big changes in the future. He also loved geology, which is, as the film puts it, a study of pressure and time. By being friendly and helpful and using his intelligence, he is able to become a trustee of the corrupt and heartless prison warden Samuel Norton and enjoys several privileges. By sending a letter to the state's Senate every week for 6 years, he is able to get funding for a prison library. Eventually, Andy escapes through a tunnel that he dug using a small hammer, which he hid in a Bible. It takes him 19 years to dig that tunnel, a project that he hides behind a poster of a pin-up girl. With his soft and patient approach, he did not only conquer a thick concrete wall, but also the prison's authority. His escape, however, is explosive. He rushes into the tunnel, gets on the other side, breaks a sewer pipe, crawls through 500 yards of excrement, cashes in, exposes the warden to the media, and flees to Mexico. Thus, he doesn't abstain from using force completely, he just saves it for the right opportunity that took him 19 years of softness to create. To be like water means that we're able to adapt to different circumstances. Every situation has something positive to it. In still water, the dust can settle, so it becomes clear. Streaming water passes different places and sceneries and nurtures the things that it encounters. In the Yang society we live in, we only seem to value one part of human existence, which is the active part that revolves around achievement, speed, and success. We get educated, take on a lot of responsibility in regards to work and family, try to get rich and do it as quickly as possible, and judge each other as human doings rather than human beings. Being useless or stupid or ugly or poor is generally considered undesirable. But if we master the flexibility of finding the positive in the negative, we'll realize that these undesired characteristics have positive aspects to them. It's just a matter of perception. For example, being poor means less money and possessions to worry about, and being ugly means that we're less likely to end up in a string of abusive relationships, and that people like us for our personality instead of looks. In the Taoist work Zhuangzi, there's a story about a crooked tree, which was so deformed compared to the straight trees that lumberjacks labeled it useless, as it was unable to turn into usable wooden planks. Then Zhuangzi came along and stated that the tree is actually very suitable as a place to relax. Because the tree was seen as useless by the lumberjacks, it never got chopped down, so it became old and big, and people eventually turned it into a holy site. So the longevity of the tree was due to its uselessness. Being useless may not lead to a good reputation and will probably evoke shaming and blaming by our environment, but it also leads to less burdens, less pressure, and probably a much more relaxed life. Every cloud has a silver lining. Moreover, water always seeks the lower places and makes the best out of circumstances that no one wants to be in. Life is characterized by softness, and softness is strength. Soft things don't break easily, because they can bend and yield, unlike the brittle and rigid. Even the hardest of rock can be overcome by the gentleness of water and even the blowing of the wind. Hence, a famous actor, philosopher, and martial artist once said, "Don't get set into one form, adapt it and build your own, and let it grow." Be like water. Thank you for watching.
Stanford University.
Is this on? Yes. Well, congratulations. Everybody has survived the midterm, including the TAs so far, who recently have been let out of their entombment with thousands of pages of exam pages. So those are rolling along, and everybody is still awake, so that's good. Okay, so we have now officially entered the second half of the course. And organizational things, readings will now be read, hopefully. Okay, so that's not useful. Books. Now is a good time to actually go and start reading those books. And again, if you are not up to all of both of them, some recommended chapters have come along. And pay attention to those. And again, a subset of you may not know it yet, but about 25% of you will have your life transformed by that chaos book, whereas 25% will resent the purchase price and by forcing you to do this. Also, another major transition here, which is, as far as I can tell so far, I have run out of steam turning the extended notes into actual expository writing. So they're just going to take the form of really poorly organized outlines. And so that happens. Okay. What else? What we now transition to is going to be our strategy for the rest of our course, which is to look at various subjects. And coming down the pike after the lectures today and Friday on sexual behavior will be aggression, competition, cooperation, empathy, potentially language use, schizophrenia. Somewhere in there, there's going to be a week or so on that chaos stuff. But for all of these subjects, we are now going to follow the general strategy. We will start off looking at what the behavior is. And what we're going to try to do there, in addition to looking at it in lots of different species, is to be as objective as any good old ethologist in considering the fixed action patterns of a particular behavior. That established, with the promise that in lots of cases what we think comprise some of these behaviors turn out not to be the case. That established, what we will start is our inexorable march to the left, the timeline that constitutes everything we learn now, stepping back and saying, okay, 1 millisecond before that behavior occurred, what was going on in the brain? What parts of the brain, what neurotransmitters, all of that. Stepping back before that, a second before, a minute before, whatever, what was it in the environment that triggered the brain to produce that behavior? What was the acute releasing stimulus? Stepping back, what do hormone levels that hour, that day, some such time span of that, what acute hormonal exposure had to do with sensitizing you to the environmental stimulus, which released the nervous system into generating behavior, marching all the way back, throwing in culture someplace or other, perinatal effects, early developmental hormonal stuff, eventually considering what do the genetics of the individual, of the population, of the species, evolution kicking in there someplace or other, what do all of these things and something having to do with ecology thrown in there just for good measure, working our way back in each of these cases, understanding what was the biology of 1 second before, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 million years before that gave rise to it. Back to our two major themes from day one. We are now about to be unbound, unfettered by our buckets, our categorical buckets, and instead explore their interactions. The other being that notion from the very first class, which is at any given point, if we're talking about chronic hormonal effects on this behavior, what we're talking about is the way those hormone patterns were shaped during this period, the way genes contributed to the enzymes that make the hormones, the receptors. The second you're talking about genetics, all of this is becoming apparent. At every one of these points, whatever point we are talking about is going to be the end product of everything to the left and just this temporary sort of footing before going to the things on the right. So this will be our strategy forever after now. So we start off doing this with looking at sexual behavior, the neurobiology, the endocrinology, and the early experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So to inaugurate the second half of the course, and the fact that it's starting off with lectures on sexual behavior, it has to start off with the stupid obligatory sex joke. Okay, so the Martians come to Earth, and they turn out to be great guys. They're really terrific. They get along wonderfully with Earthlings. All of them like each other a lot. They're all becoming great friends. They pass their hours learning about each other's planets. What's the weather like there? What are sports like here? What are recipes? Everybody's getting along terrifically. And eventually, the Earthlings and the Martians are getting along well enough that they get around to asking the question that everybody's really interested in, which is, well, how do you folks go about reproducing? So the decision is made, the Martians are going to go first, so they clear out a big space and a whole bunch of Martians come in there and they stand on top of each other's heads and their noses flash different colors and steam comes out of various orifices and there's clanking noises and whatever, and out pops a new little Martian. And the Earthlings say, wow, that was great, and love the concept, and I got great video of that, and that's terrific, and all of that. Okay, so that's worked out, and now it's the humans' turn. So a willing couple is found, and some space is cleared out, and the Martians sit down there with their video cameras as well, and clicking away, and this couple goes at it, and they finish the whole thing in a sweaty mess at the end, and the Martians say, that's wonderful, that's so interesting, you Earthlings are just endless in the fascinating things you do, but we have one question though, and which is, so where's the new human? And he said, oh, that takes 9 months. They said, well, why were they in such a rush at the end? So our first question here is, why were they in such a rush at the end? Okay, 3 possible answers. Choice number 1, vote for it. Why were they in such a rush at the end? Number 1, because they were acting with this fervent desire to do something for the good of the species. Just seeing if any hands go up, that's a good thing. Option number 2, doing that because you want to maximize the number of copies of your genes passed on to the next generation. Option number 3, because it feels good. Okay, 1 hand goes up, and I'm not sure what that indicates about everyone, but I will remind you from the survey in the first class there that a far greater percentage of you want to learn about depression than about sexual behaviors. So there you have it with the Stanford experience. Okay, because it feels good. And what we deal with here right off the start is this important dichotomy between proximal and distal explanations for behavior. Explanation, a distal explanation for sexual behavior, parentheses, why were they in such a rush at the end, passing on copies to your genes, the effects of hormones on certain reward pathways in the brain, all of that. Proximal mechanism being that it feels good. And starting off, right off the bat, the thing to make sense of with sexual behavior is it is driven by this amazing little loop here of sensory stimuli and feedback and immediate sensations that drive the behavior coming out. And all this stuff down here is for the doctoral thesis.
Water is the softest and most yielding.
Oh man, Austria?